Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Dara Albright. I'm the founder of dWealth Education, and I'm so thrilled to be hosting today's webinar session titled How Winemakers Are Employing Web3 to Gain a Competitive Edge. This webinar is part of a Learn to Earn webinar series in partnership with Club dVIN, the world's premier global wine club that is transforming the investment-grade wine market through blockchain innovation. This webinar series is designed to bring blockchain education and economic opportunity to all those involved in the global wine trade, including winemakers, wineries, wine distributors, wine collectors, wine financiers, and of course, everyday investors who are simply seeking portfolio diversification and better risk-adjusted returns that we know that wine brings. In addition to some really great educational content, all of you attending our live sessions will be earning a number of rewards that will allow you to monetize your webinar participation. That's everything from tokens to fintech products to tickets to wine events to membership discounts and much more. Towards the end of today's session, we'll be discussing today's rewards and how to claim them, so please stick around for that. Also, as become a tradition in these webinars, dVIN will also be raffling off another bottle of rare wine to all attendees who participate in at least one of today's webinar polls. So polls really are helpful to us in that they help us frame the discussion to really better meet your goals and objectives. So with that, I'm going to launch the first one right now. They're really easy. You don't have to study for them. The first poll is, what best describes you? Are you a winemaker? Are you in the wine business, an investor, a collector, a consumer? Are you in blockchain, financial professional, advisor, other? And please, if you could start taking that poll, that will be really helpful just to get an idea of who's with us today. And I'll leave that up for a few seconds while people are doing that. And remember, if you answer the polls, you're automatically you're automatically in the giveaway. So please do that. While you're answering that, it's my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. We have with us today David Garrett and Jana Kreilein, the two co-founders of Club dVIN, as well as Michael Juergens, who leads Deloitte's Winery Solutions and Services practice. Our panelists are going to be discussing how blockchain is being used in the wine industry to overcome challenges relating to traceability, authenticity, and supply chain data so that winemakers today can capture market share and gain a competitive edge. So before I bring our speakers on stage, I just have a few housekeeping items. So you'll notice that there's a dashboard on the upper right part of your screen. There's a section there for questions. There's a section there for chatting, and there's one for handouts. Please use the Q&A section to ask any questions as they come to you. Please use the chat section to share any of your thoughts and insights. You could start, if you want, by sharing what wine you picked out today for today's discussion. Also, under the handout section, you'll find a link to a recent report published by Michael that is filled with invaluable information for helping wineries capitalize on blockchain innovation. So please download that at your convenience as well. There are also, at the bottom of your screen, lots of emojis that you could use to express yourself during our session today. We love those happy faces and hearts, so please keep them coming. So one final poll just before we jump in. That's the last one, and this is really will help us frame the discussion. We want to know, how would you describe your knowledge of blockchain, Web3, and tokenization? Is this all new to you? Is this something you've already gone down the rabbit hole with, that you've been doing a lot of research on? Or is this somewhat, that you just kind of new to it, but somewhat familiar? So if you could just give us some thoughts there, that would be helpful. All right. It looks like we've got a good diversity here with us today. We've got a bunch of investors, collectors, winemakers, consumers, financial professionals, blockchain executives. And it looks like we've got a lot of people that have been doing a lot of research in the space. So that's great. I'll give another second on that poll. And now we could dive in and get the conversation rolling. Maybe we could start with you guys doing a brief introduction to yourselves and telling the attendees a little bit about your expertise. Jana, you want to start?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hi. So my name is Jana Kreilein. I'm one of the founders of dVIN, and my background is very much wine. Got into blockchain. It's been 3.5 years really into it. So yeah, fully wine-backed knowledge here, which I think is fascinating. I basically started out as a sommelier. I went all the way up through the education system, kind of on both sides, the academic side and the service side. And then I got my hands dirty and learned winemaking in Germany. Did a bunch of harvests here. I'm based in Düsseldorf in Germany, but I am Canadian. And then I started to do kind of wine communication for international brands. So I always say I really hate the term, but most people would consider it a wine influencer, a wine communicator, wine educator. And I did that for a few years and traveled the globe and communicated wine for some of the big brands out there. And then I filmed a couple of TV projects, one of which was with the 2008 World's Best Sommelier, Aldo Somm. We traveled through the Austrian wine regions and filmed a documentary series in English and German. That was awesome. And then I met Dave, and we started up dVIN Labs. So that's me.
Excellent. David?
Thanks, Dara. Thanks, everybody. I'm Dave Garrett. I'm the other co-founder of dVIN. I was a tech guy for a long time, but then I sold my company and started basically dumped it all into vineyards and wineries. Worked in wine kind of all over the world, in Argentina, Hong Kong, California. Now I live in Spain, here in Barcelona. And I've been involved in lots of different aspects of the wine business, from, starting a vineyard and a winery to doing digital transformation with different wineries around the world, a little bit of M&A. I've done some film and television work in wine. But I've been mostly, for 20 years obsessed with data. Because when I started in the wine business, I realized there was just no good data. And it was very difficult to make decisions. And so for a long time, I've been looking for solutions on how to find more data in the wine business to make, smart data-driven decisions. And blockchain really kind of reached out to me, I guess about 3 years ago, and we started looking into different ways that that blockchain could help us find data, and that's kind of where we are today. And I'm really excited that we're here with dWealth, dVIN, and Deloitte. Very exciting.
Wow.
What a perfect segue, Dave. Well played, sir. So I'm Mike Juergens. I guess on a personal level, I'm a wine guy. I am on deck to become the 59th American to qualify as a Master of Wine, if I can get over that final hump. And I founded the wine industry in the Kingdom of Bhutan and the Himalayas. So that's on a personal level. On a professional level, I run Deloitte's Winery Solutions and Services practice. We are the largest provider of professional services to the wine industry, with activity in 17 countries on all wine producing continents. And where we play is we are not the vineyard consultants. We are not the winemaking consultants. We provide services around all of the business aspects of wine, whether that's technology, M&A, excise taxes, family office, structuring, cybersecurity, org model, cost management, accounting, all of that stuff. And so that's really where our expertise lies. And so all of the Web3 stuff is kind of right in our power alley. Not just for the wine business, but we are doing this across, every industry around the globe. So we're able to leverage the breadth and the scope of our global, business to bring those learnings into the wine space. So happy to be here.
That's great. So I want to start with the first question. Michael, I had read your recent report, which I really loved. And in it, you have this analogy where you show how wineries today will be employing Web3 and tokenization into their business in much the same way that they reluctantly did back in the 90s when the internet was first emerging. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see that playing out, and how wineries are going to be starting to adapt this technology and why.
Yeah, I think I've told this story a couple times before, so apologies to those of you who've heard it before. But I was doing an ERP implementation at a large winery back in the 90s, probably about 98. We were setting up the ERP system, and I remember having this conversation with the CIO, where I was like, "Hey, you're putting in this technology solution. Would you also like a website?" And this was, sort of right at the birth of e-commerce, or whatever we called it back then. And I'll never forget this. The CIO looked at me, and said, "Mike, the hell is wrong with you? We're a wine company. What in the world would we want to use the internet for?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll shut up now." And I went away. And now you think about that today, it's inconceivable to think that a winery would exist without some sort of internet presence. Hell, my winery, I had a website up 5 years before I had any wine to sell, just to tell the story and communicate it. And it's not just even about telling the story. We saw this in the pandemic, where the wineries that had better direct-to-consumer functionality, they thrived. And the ones that didn't really got hammered. And so I don't think that it's a stretch. Today, looking back at 1998 and going, what a bunch of idiots. Like, why did they not think about this? It's not a stretch to think that in 2030 or 2035, wineries are looking back going, oh my God, of course, like Web3 tech is part and parcel of our business operations. Now, the use cases are still unclear, just like they were unclear in the late 90s for how you might use the internet. But some things are going to crystallize. And what I see is that smart wineries are thinking about what those might be and doing pilots and playing around. And my guess is it'll coalesce. And wineries can choose to be a pioneer or a fast follower or a laggard, or however they want to play in that space. But it's going to happen. I mean, it will.
It's here.
And that's basically how Dave, how many wineries approached you before dVIN came about and basically came to you as the wine and tech guy that they knew, and were like, hey, what do we do? Blockchain is we're starting to hear about blockchain, and we feel like we want to be ahead of the curve. Like, can you help?
Yeah, I think we're even earlier than 1998. Like right now, the way I think about it is, I remember back kind of when the web was first being introduced, the big question on everybody's mind was, does your if you're getting a new computer for your business, would that computer have TCP/IP operability, right? Like that was the big question back then. And we all think now, well, who uses TCP/IP anymore? Except for the fact that, literally everything you do all day uses TCP/IP, right? So the thinking back then, and I remember people getting computers in kind of the early 90s, where there was a big question: do I want to connect it to the internet or do I not want to? And that's kind of where I think we are in the world. We're still talking about blockchain technology and using words like NFT and Web3 and crypto and wallet and all of these words that I think are kind of, easy for the kind of early adopter tech people to understand, in the same way that TCP/IP is, transmission control protocol, internet protocol, which people knew kind of back in the day. But I think, very soon you're going to start seeing those words drop away, and people will just use the blockchain like they use the internet today, or they use the web.
Yeah, agree. Well, the first word probably will go is NFT, right? Yeah. It'll probably.
I can't even spell NFT, Dara.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about tokenization and how it's being used to facilitate authenticity, because that's a big issue in the space.
Sure. So we can talk about that. I'll talk about that a little bit. So what we're doing at dVIN, and kind of we sort of started thinking about this back in 2021, and we looked into a lot of different things. We'd gotten a lot of my friends in the wine industry were sending me proposals that they'd gotten from different blockchain providers, or different blockchain projects, saying, should I do this? Should I not do this? And we were evaluating them and kind of thinking, where's the real value here? Like, where does the value come from? And, some of these projects were trying to do a new version of Sotheby's, and some of them were trying to do a new blockchain version of like Berry Brothers or London City Bond, and that was all interesting. But I didn't see that as I thought of this like a cool natural progression, but it wasn't solving any real problems. It was doing kind of the same thing that Sotheby's have been doing for 180 years, or Bonham's has been doing for 150 years, or that Berry Brothers has been. I think Berry Brothers is more than 200 years. They've been providing that service. So I wanted to see like where could we really go if we weren't trying to replace any existing business, but we were trying to solve real problems. And so where we really came down was figuring out how to create a digital product passport, or some people call it a digital twin. I like to call it a digital deed of ownership. We at dVIN, we call it a digital corp. But basically the idea is, how can we create a deed on the internet that says this thing is owned by this person or by this entity, and every time that changes hands, we can have a transparent view of that. And so what that evolves into is the ability to be able to say, okay, well, if I can track ownership of something, then it's very easy for me to see if that's counterfeit or if it's real. And you can add all kinds of things to it. You can add, some technology to the bottle. We work with a bunch of different technology providers. You can add a chain of custody. There's a bunch of things that you can add to it. But at its very heart, what we do with the digital cork is we provide a digital deed of ownership to a bottle of wine. So now you know who owns that bottle. And that creates a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't even think of, from authentication on one side to smoother, cheaper, more efficient transactions in the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. There's also the element of community, that this really is technology that brings communities together. And maybe we could talk a little bit about that too. How do you guys see wineries in particular using NFTs and loyalty programs to engage their customers and grow their customer base?
I can jump in on that one. So basically, Dave was talking about the digital deed of ownership that we attach to a bottle of wine. What happens to that digital deed of ownership when the bottle is uncorked is that NFT, since we're going to use the word that will soon be out of date, that NFT is then destroyed. And what happens is it basically, it kind of like recreates itself. It turns itself into something else, right? So that's destroyed, and then you get another kind of NFT that's non-transferable that goes right back into that same account. We're calling it an account. It's a wallet. And then what that does is really interesting. That process, what happens there is that the winemaker is now directly in contact with the consumer at the point of consumption. So it's something that's never happened in the history of wine before, right? This is now on chain, and it's connecting from grape to glass all the way through the supply chain. You have the end consumer basically telling the winemaker, hi, it's me who just opened the bottle and I'm sharing it with this many people, who can then take that token and share it to up to 12 people, for example, per regular size bottle. Now, what the winemaker can do with that information is a whole bunch of things. But one of the things they can do, right, is first of all, they see their truest fans. They can identify who their community actually is, or where they've got their most concentrated, centers of true fans. And then that creates opportunities for brand loyalty. So, I mean, this is something that is super valuable for any business, but in the wine industry, it's just never happened before. So now wineries can reach out and say, hey, I noticed that you've been drinking a lot of my wines in the last year or in the last 5 years or whatever. I want to actually connect with you because you're a valuable person in my ecosystem, and I want to reward you. And that's where there's all kinds of ways that you can incentivize your community and connect with them and really build like a meaningful relationships with the people who are enjoying your production, your wine.
One of the things I thought was really interesting, Michael, in your report, there you had a quote in there that basically, and to what Jana is saying here, where you talked about you can not only track who bought the wine, and when you guys were talking about consumer engagement, but potentially everyone who drank that bottle.
Yeah, so I think, I'll tell another story, which is when I went to Belgium, one of my friends said, oh, you're going to Belgium, you're going to Brussels, you have to drink this beer, Westvleteren 12. And I was like, I'm not a beer guy, I don't give a shit. He goes, no, it's the best beer in the world, and you only get it there. So I went to a bar and I said, I had it written down. I said, can you sell me this? And the guy said, yes, we just got our allocation. I have 12. Would you like one? I said, sure. I order one. It comes in a plain brown bottle, no label. The guy takes the cap off, hands it to me. And so I take the cap and I'm like, I don't want your trash. And I hand it back to him. And he goes, no. You don't want the cap? And I go, okay. So I put it in my pocket. Night goes on. I go home. The next morning, I look in my pocket. I'm like, oh, I have this beer cap. What the hell? So I Googled it. And the beer caps are selling on eBay for like $8. And so it's like this beer is important to the people that care about it, that they are collecting these things to say, I had this experience. And we do this now. Like I collect wine corks from special bottles. And if it's a really special bottle, I actually save the entire bottle. But there's only one. There's only one cork. There's only one bottle. And so if I'm at a place where I'm drinking something crazy. I drank a 1904 Lafite a couple months ago at like a Lafite tasting, and it was great. But it's not my bottle. It's not my cork. I have no way to sort of put that in my collection. But I can through a kind of a digital tasting token. And so I think that broadens my aperture as a consumer. But from the producer side, there's huge value in knowing, who's drinking it, even if they're not the ones that are buying it. Right?
Yeah. And it affects allocation, right? Like in the future, if you think about the way allocation works today, and you could say, hey, who's really drinking the wines and who deserves to have the allocation here? And when you can go back and say, oh, this person has this many tasting tokens from us.
Well, and you think about like Donald Trump, politics aside, and I'm not trying to bring this up, but Donald Trump is a teetotaler. But I have a friend who's reasonably close to his inner circle, and he talks about how he's so generous with his wine, but he doesn't drink. So if you're a producer, you're like, oh, Donald Trump's buying oodles of this wine, but he's not drinking any of it. He's sharing it with all of his friends. I want to know who those friends are, not necessarily Donald Trump, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and think about like customer acquisition, right? Like who's the most likely person to be the next customer of your wine than someone who just tasted it for the first time? And more importantly, was just tasted it because a friend of theirs poured it for them. Like that's the very best, like the best ambassador that you could ever hope for as any kind of brand, right? Is that somebody out there is pouring or is introducing your product to their friends and family. Being able to connect with them and then say, hey, your friend just poured you a glass of something amazing. Let me know if you want to buy a bottle. Right? Like that's the kind of thing that can be great. Or let me know if you want to visit the winery. Let me know if you want to know more about this. I'll give you a 20% discount. Like it's a way to really connect with people that are just trying your brand for the first time.
So a question just came in from Peter who asks, where is the NFT on the bottle? So maybe you want to explain.
What we do, so we fold it up into like a little thing, and then we put it inside the bottle and we put the cork on.
People will take this literally, Dave. Oh God.
I'm sorry. I was just being a jerk. No, it's so what we do, and Mike, I'd love to hear about what you guys are doing at the Bhutan Wine Company. But we work with a wide variety of different on-bottle tech, right? Because there's a lot of different wineries. There are some wineries where their primary focus is authenticity, and for those wineries, we use actually Mike can tell you about it, but like a super high-end, very impossible, like kind of the Rolls Royce of on-bottle tech that is impossible to counterfeit, impossible to tamper-proof, waterproof, heat-proof. But it kind of ranges from there all the way down to like a simple QR code. We work with a company that does nanotechnology. They've got smart ink, and they print smart ink on the label that, again, tamper-proof. It's all encrypted. It's really, really cool. There's another company, actually one of the most popular is called Proof Tag. And that's a little tag that's got like a little bit of liquid in it that they put on every bottle. And that liquid, if, for example, the bottle is too warm or too cold in transit, that liquid changes color. So you can just look, by looking at the bottle, you can be like, oh, well, that bottle wasn't, wasn't stored correctly or wasn't transported correctly. But there's a bunch of different ways. As long as the bottle has some sort of unique identifier on it, we can then take the NFT or take the digital cork and connect it to that bottle. We can connect those things. Mike, you want to talk about what you guys are doing in Bhutan?
Yeah. So I think there's huge benefits in terms of putting a bottle on the blockchain. It allows for ease of transferability. It allows for more seamless trading. It allows for different currency options. It's all completely transparent and on the web. Where it falls down is with the physical bottle itself. And so, I might have an NFT, but I swap out the bottle when I send it to you with something that looks fake. So I think this is kind of like in cybersecurity where you're never going to defeat all the hackers. But what you want to do is you want to make it so problematic that the 14-year-old kids that are screwing around, the little script kiddie guys, like stop screwing with it. And so I think from an authenticity and provenance perspective, marrying up some sort of a digital asset with some sort of a physical technology that protects the bottle itself. I like the proof tag thing. What we're doing at Bhutan is we're using nano diamond technology, which is similar to proof tag. It's unrepeatable, can't be counterfeited, and that will say that this bottle is what it is supposed to be, and then the digital asset will say it's intrinsically linked to this, so the two move in lockstep. Now, some smart person might still be able to figure out how to flip the bottle over and drill a tiny hole through the punt and suck out all the wine and then melt glass back. But now it's starting to get a lot more difficult to do, right?
And more importantly, if it's got the tag on it, you know who owned it before you. You know the chain of ownership.
Correct.
So like that doesn't exist in the world today. Like if you drink a counterfeit bottle, you can't track it back to who owned it before. But if you can use the blockchain to say, okay, I know who owned it before and who owned it before that and who owned it before that, like Interpol knows who to talk to. And like if it's an expensive bottle of wine, it's not really worth the risk anymore.
Agree. Yep.
It's like the tracer program. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about the diamond example? Because I always think that really hits it home for people.
Sure. So one of the folks that we worked with when we were putting this project together was a guy that sort of led the team that built the tracer project for the diamond industry. It was originally built for De Beers, but it's now been donated to the industry, and it's run by the whole diamond industry as a whole. And they were trying to combat the problem of blood diamonds, right? They wanted to, there was a flood of blood diamonds on the market, and it was causing real problems. It was bringing the price down for diamonds that were ethically sourced. So they created a blockchain. What's interesting about diamonds is, and this kind of feeds into what Mike is doing. the nano diamonds. Every diamond under UV light throws a unique signature. So and that's even if the diamond has been cut, or actually even if it's been crushed. So that unique signature, what the tracer program did was they took that signature and they put it on the blockchain, and they said, okay, this diamond came from this mine, and they traced it all the way through the supply chain, all the way through to retail. So now, like, you can't buy a diamond that's not on the system. No licensed retailer will sell a diamond that can't be traced back to the original mine. So what happened is there's really no market for blood diamonds anymore. But what they didn't anticipate, but kind of a side benefit, was one of the second biggest, or another huge problem in the diamond industry, was industrial theft, where not theft like, you sneak into your grandma's house and you steal something out of her jewelry drawer, but like stealing like large quantities of diamonds. They don't do that anymore. You can't, because you could steal diamonds, but no one's going to buy them from you because they can look at that diamond, they can look it up, and they can see who owns it. And so, they'll just, if you try to sell a stolen diamond, they'll just return it to the owner and probably prosecute you. So right. It's really turned what was two really enormous problems in the diamond industry that are almost completely eliminated in 6 years, which is pretty cool. I don't think it's going to be that short in the wine industry. I think it's going to take a lot longer, but we're definitely following that model.
Well, one of the things that I think we get a lot of questions on as it relates to like blockchain technology is it's pretty easy to think about, oh, I'm buying a bottle of DRC or Domaine Loire, and I want to make sure it's got the provenance, and I want to make sure it's got authenticity. But in the volume of fine wine, or in the volume of wine, the fine wine piece is minuscule, right? And it's only a small handful of producers, whereas the vast majority is, $10, $15, $20. And is there a use case that would say there is still value in putting things like that on the blockchain? And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, Dave, but I'll share with you an example of one of the things that is happening in the US right now, which is California Senate Bill E241 or EB 241. And that says I have to disclose my carbon emissions from the production of the wine until it gets to the person who's going to drink the wine. And that's all fine and good, except between us is a distributor. And I have no idea what happens once that bottle of wine goes on the distributor truck. Did they drive it around for 5 days and drop it off? Or did they, take it on horseback? Like, I have no idea, right? But I have to report this as part of my annual carbon emissions reporting. And at some point in time, there's going to be an audit that's required as well, with some fines associated if you don't do it. And so having traceability all the way through the ecosystem, even for that $8, $10 bottle of wine, still potentially has a lot of value. And so I would encourage those of you who are on the phone and are saying, oh, we make a $20, Merlot. This doesn't apply to us because we're not Petrus. Instead of thinking about it that way, you should be thinking about what are the use cases that do apply and could drive a lot of value. And I think there's, that's one. I could probably come up with 10 more off the top of my head if pushed. But Dave, curious to kind of get your reaction to the non-luxury segment of wineries.
For sure. So look, wine is, data in the wine industry is difficult because it's, famously atomized, right? It's like there's this, over the course of the last 20 years or so, most big industries in the world have consolidated, right? There's like 8 companies in the world that provide all of our food, and there's like 9 companies in the world that provide all of our energy. But with wine, it's very different, right? There's about 30,000 independent wineries in the world providing just luxury wine, not to mention like the less expensive wine, but like 30,000 independent producers. There's about 10 million independent middlemen. When you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like when you're buying a $50 bottle of wine or even like a $30 bottle of wine, you're probably not buying it from Walmart unless you're Jana. You're probably buying it from a really nice, like your corner shop that's like an independent store that's been doing it for 2 generations and like they still keep their inventory on a clipboard, or you're buying it, like you're not getting it at like Chili's, you're buying it at a nice restaurant, and that restaurant, again, probably independently owned. They're probably keeping their inventory in Google Docs. And that's just true all the way up the line, right? Like the distributors are small, mostly because in the States, everything is kind of segregated by state because of the 3-tier system. And then the importers are really small. And then the wineries are really small. So because there's been no consolidation, that means that it's been really difficult to install these really big information systems like, what Michael does or what Deloitte does for all their other customers. So without that data, it's really hard. What we're doing and what the blockchain provides for is something I find super, super interesting, which is one of the things that we're building is called a dPIN. So a dPIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network, right? And what that is it's kind of like a system of like a hardware system. In our case, it would be like a system of what we call RFID interrogators, which is like a little device that like looks for signals. And then on the bottle, you put an RFID tag, which provides a signal. So there's a device that reads the signal and a little thing that sends the signal. But instead of having to own the whole network, having one company create the whole network with all 10 million independent people and all 30,000 independent winemakers, you can create a protocol and a payment system, an incentive or payment system. So now anybody can put one of these interrogators up in their warehouse or in a temperature-controlled truck or in a temperature-controlled shipping container, and they can earn a little bit of money every time a bottle of wine passes through that system. And what that incentive system creates is a way to very rapidly create a global network that can track every single bottle as it makes its way through the supply chain. And one of the first use cases that we thought of for that was just what Mike was talking about, like because wineries are famously ecologically sensitive. They rely on the terroir for their business and for their livelihood. So they're really concerned about climate change. They're concerned about the environment. So they want to be ecologically sustainable. The problem is shipping bottles of wine around the world is not super carbon friendly. But if you can track every bottle all the way through the supply chain, and we say from grape to glass, from the winemaker to the consumer, if you can track it using something like a dPIN, not only do you get great chain of custody data, you can make sure that bottle was stored correctly, transported correctly with right temperature and humidity, but you can also, it's very easy then to calculate what the carbon footprint on that individual unique bottle is. And with a smart contract, you can say, great, we know how much the carbon footprint on that bottle is. We can charge a little bit extra to purchase a carbon offset, and now your winery can be completely carbon neutral. And I know that like in Bhutan it's carbon negative. That's fine, but we can start with carbon neutral and then maybe get to carbon negative in the future.
Well, but I think it's more so than that. Like you think about like, oh, that's nice to have, and it's great to be carbon negative, and that's a good marketing story to tell, and so on and so forth. But the reality of it is we have ESG reporting requirements. They're live in the EU today. They're proposed in the US right now. They're proposed in Australia. This is going to be, de rigueur for every publicly traded company. Now, and I get that a lot of wineries are private, but some of those private wineries would like to go public, or they'd like to be sold, or they like, and we need to be able to, if we're going to operate in the public markets, be compliant with those ESG reporting requirements, and traceability is a component of that. Now, admittedly, it's staged in, and we've got some time, and there's stuff. But if you take a 5-year view of your business or a 10-year view of your business, just recognize you're probably going to be doing this. And so then the question becomes, how do you assign sort of estimates and do more like a standard-based costing approach to carbon emissions and traceability, or do you get very precise with it? And there's costs associated with each and pros and cons, but it's going to be virtually impossible to be precise without some sort of technology components that allow you to grasp, copious amounts of data and synthesize them very quickly. I mean, that's
fascinating. So when it comes to the economics of that, I mean, you think about that, how much cost savings do you think it saves? I mean, we're talking about now basically with the click of a button, because you have the technology that's available to, to do anything from tracing or, to even, all the money that they would have to be putting into this to understand it. How much money are the wineries going to be saving by moving to, incorporating their business onto the blockchain?
I don't know that they're going to save money per se. I mean, it's going to cost money to do it, but there's reasons to do it that are above and beyond, the cost, which is the benefit outweighs the cost. And so if you think about just the regulatory environment, if you decide that you're going to be a public company and, pick your public company, in the wine space, that company has decided we're going to participate in the capital markets. We get all the access to that capital. The downside is we have to file financial reports. They need to be audited by an independent auditor. And there's a ton of regulatory costs associated with that. But you get the upside of being able to participate in the public capital markets. And so we see wineries that are, making those choices all the time. And it's never it costs $1, so we're not going to do it. It's like it costs $1, but the benefit that we perceive is X. I'll give you an example. So we have the new EU wine labeling requirement. So we have to now label all the ingredients that go into the bottle. And that takes effect for every wine produced in the EU, or every wine produced that is sold in the EU that was made after December 7th, 2023. So this summer, all the wine that gets made in the world that's going to be sold in the EU has to have an ingredient list. So now you start talking about like, okay, how do we do the ingredients? Because today I've got my winemaker and he's going down the barrel row and he's tasting this barrel and he goes, oh, this needs sulfur. And he goes to the next barrel, oh, this needs acid. Oh, this next one, oh, it needs more potassium metabisulfite. But, and we have historically not tracked that. And now we need to, if we want to sell wine in the EU. And so the question then becomes, all right, if you're a winery, you can look at it and say, I need to put a set of systems and processes in to track all this so I know what's in it. And then I need to come up with some sort of a QR code or something else that people can scan it. And it has to be multilingual because the Italian guy, needs to know the French one. And it has to comply with GDPR privacy requirements. So I can't track who's scanning it. Wow. And I have to build all this stuff out.
On this much space.
On that much space.
Wow.
And there's a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
And you can choose, well, I don't want to deal with that. And then the downside is guess what? You're not selling wine in the EU. So you better have some pretty strong ties to Asia, in the US. And the US is watching this closely. We're a half a step behind this. We're just waiting to see, is this thing going to be a gigantic cluster, or is it going to be actually helpful and useful to the consumers? I mean, this is not a hypothetical. This is if you haven't figured this out in July when harvest is next month and you're about to be, making that wine, you're in trouble. You better get on top of that. So that is a real world example of how you might think about, well, should we do this? Well, probably. And you could do it with clipboards and it's going to be a lot more expensive and a lot less precise. That's an option.
But some sort of,
I'll get off my soapbox. I feel like
no, but I get it. But look, digital transformation has waited a long time for the wine industry. It's every other industry in the world has looked at the value of data, the value of having a digital workspace, and has embraced it, and frankly has done well. And one of the big things that I always say that the wine industry has single-handedly kept the clipboard industry in business for the last 20 years. But where we are today is. Yeah, and then chalk. But where we are in the wine industry today really is sort of a crisis of, every other business has built close ties to their consumers. Wine hasn't really done that. And so by not knowing who their consumers are, as we change, like have this real generational shift, right? Like the next generation of wine consumers are digital natives. The last generation of wine consumers, like I can still remember a time when I couldn't find every piece of information that I ever wanted and connect with everybody in the world in my pocket. Like I remember that time. Those were my formative years. But like not the new consumers. And the new consumers have different expectations about what they want. And wine just hasn't really figured that out yet. Or at least the industry in general hasn't figured that out yet. And they're kind of behind the eight ball. And part of that is, again, because it wasn't easy. Right? It's not easy. It wasn't easy to do digital transformation in the wine industry. A, it's expensive. B, it's that lack of consolidation, which I love the lack of consolidation. I love that when I'm drinking, my little Spanish, my little Rioja, it's like a little tiny winemaker that very few people know. And like, I love that. But I also know that in order for that business to survive, they're going to have to figure out a way to bring their business into this century. And what I find really compelling is that blockchain provides a lot of solutions that are not just cost effective, but also provide such outsized asymmetrical value.
Well, and Dave, I think if you just kind of broadly think about it, the boomers tended to be extremely category and brand loyal, right? So, my dad drank Cuddy Sark Scotch. That's what he drank. That was it. And, for the folks who are drinking wine, they drink Silver Oak, Alexander Valley. That's what they drink, But those folks are consuming less as they age out. And some of them are, not here anymore. And so, we're losing that. Then you got the sort of Gen X group, which is sort of somewhere in the middle. And then you have Gen Z, which is notoriously not category loyal. They'll do cocktails one night and craft beers the next night and wine the next night. And within that, they're not brand loyal at all. But what they want is they want a story that resonates with their values. And so, I'm going to buy this wine. I'm going to buy McBride Sisters because it's a black woman-owned company, and that resonates with my values. Or I'm going to buy, the Pride wine in the rainbow can because it's, I'm LGBTQIA, and that resonates with me. And so you now have to have this different story, but you have to tell it in a way that resonates with the way in which that generation receives information, which is all digital. You can't put a billboard up on the freeway or run an ad in Wine Spectator. You have to be able to say, hey, we're gonna geolocate Instagram ads around our winery and feed it, based on a reel that is. I'm talking about shit that I don't know about, right? I'm an old
I know about that shit. That's what I do.
Talk about geolocating Instagram.
No kidding.
Face match, Jana.
So you have to have this whole different way of thinking about it, right?
Thick book.
Yeah. But honestly, I mean, when I was doing, again, wine influencing, and I hate that term, it was like impossible that could not have been my career. It was interesting, but it was like, I wanted to talk to wineries that were making high quality wines in an artisanal way, that were, producing wines that I thought were really cool and had a story to actually tell. But, you can do that as a hobby, but like, you can't do that in a way that you're like making a career out of it, because those wineries can't, there's no reason for them to talk to an influencer who can communicate their message to the world when they can only sell to this many people or whatever. It's the same thing with like brand loyalty. You have to figure out who you actually want to talk to in a meaningful way and be able to connect with them, like, so that it's worth what you're putting into it. And the same thing goes for everything with blockchain, through the supply chain, with everything. It's like, what is the data worth to you? And like, if you can actually create really valuable data, specific valuable data, then like, I mean, my God, the power behind that is incredible.
Well, and I think that this idea of how do you communicate with that consumer, blockchain is a component of that. And I know we've been pretty focused on blockchain, but I do want to, for the wineries that are on the call that are thinking about, the way I think about Web 3.0, and there's not any, specific definition to this, but, you've got the multiverse, not the multiverse, you know what I'm talking about. Metaverse. Thank you. You got the metaverse. You've got virtual reality. You've got augmented reality. You've got all these other components of that Web 3.0 that, if you're smart, you're thinking about how do I build not just a blockchain solution, but how do I build a broader solution that utilizes the best use cases of these other technologies as well. Dave, I think you were introducing me to that second winery group out of Spain, which is doing kind of the metaverse style, virtual visits.
Second winery.
Virtual storefronts. I mean, I would even argue that like the 19 Crimes wine, where you can scan the label and it does cool stuff. Like that's not quite Web 3.0, but it utilizes.
It's cool though.
But it
tells
cool
a story.
People loved it, right? Yeah. So I think blockchain is a piece of this, and I think it's a hugely important piece, but it's not the only piece that I think people should be worrying about.
So do you think, it's interesting when you talk about how the labels will change. I mean, and having to put now all those ingredients on. I mean, I can see them having to list all of that. That will have to be done with technology, no? Where you
I used to work for a winery and I worked in export, and I can remember having to create specific labels for each market, and the rules were insane. It was it has to be this font size, you only have this much space, you have to say this, and this. And then we were talking about alcoholic products. When we produced a grape juice product that didn't have any alcohol in it, it was now you have to have nutrition values. How do you fit all of that in all the languages you need and have your pregnancy warnings for North America? And how do you do it? Right? And your unique identifier, and it's
highly regulated. What you're allowed to do is, there's a lot of regulatory issues. I remember one of the first problems that we had in Argentina was trying to get our labels approved by at the time, I think it was the FDA maybe, or alcohol, tobacco, ATF. But getting the labels approved was a nightmare process. Imagine now having to put all of that information on. I think that what you can do with Web3 is really be able to provide lots and lots more information and tell it in an interesting storytelling way. So,
and I agree. And then this is where, the back office regulatory components become even more important, because you've got GDPR, which is privacy requirements in Europe. And then in America, you've got some national ones, and then you've got some state specific ones. And then in other countries, you've got different ones. And guess what? In some cases, they're mutually exclusive in terms of what they require. And so it's not just hey, we've got to do this, but I've got to think it through on a geographical level. I want to do this use case, and here's my compliance requirements depending on where I'm selling my wine. And what I think is probably going to happen, and this is to the detriment of the consumer in my mind, if I'm sitting there and I'm only, I'm producing 100,000 bottles a year and I'm selling 4,000 bottles in Europe, I just throw up my hands and go, the hell with it. I'm not going to sell wine in Europe anymore because I don't want to with GDPR and the EU labeling requirement.
Yeah.
And that's, in my mind, a travesty for the consumer, which is what these laws are designed to protect in the first place.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about it. So we've got about 7 minutes left, maybe time for the wine giveaway, since we're talking all about wine, and I'm sure everyone is looking forward to that. You want to launch that, Jana?
Absolutely. Okay. So when we do these learn to earns, we want to make sure that you earn. So we are giving away a magnum of rare grower champagne, and I am going to throw it up here now. If you participated in the poll, here we go.
Are presenters eligible, Jana?
Oh.
Asking for a friend.
No.
Did it work, Dara? Oh no, I think you've got to do it.
I have to do it. Okay.
I pressed the dice. Oh, here we go.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Got it.
Still nothing.
Oh, there it goes.
Here we go.
Amy Kalnoki. You have.
Oh, that was almost. I almost won that. Woo.
All right.
All right, Amy. Awesome.
Well,
So-
Amy, we'll make sure that we'll have your contact information and make sure that bottle gets out to you. And then maybe, Jan, it's also a good time to do the QR code. So for other learn to earn goodies.
Okay, so we are going to put up a QR and hang on a second here. Send. There we go. So if you scan this QR with your smartphone, if you're logging in on your desktop, it's going to be really easy to use your smartphone for this. When you scan this, you are basically going to be able to claim a token. So this is blockchain. This is what dVIN has been building. You're going to mint a token. You're going to be able to create an account in seconds. And this token is your proof of experience that you were here tonight. And what it gives you is 2,500 points towards a VIN airdrop. We haven't talked about VIN yet. VIN is the currency that we're launching that is kind of going to drive the ecosystem within the entire luxury wine industry. So we've been talking about digital corks and tasting tokens and tracking wine from grape to glass. Now, to make this really brief, what is basically going to happen is winemakers are going to be embedding a currency into the bottle. It's going to go through the supply chain, and at the end consumer is going to be able to, like air miles, unlock this currency when they pull the cork, right? So it's incentivizing the consumer for sharing their consumption data with the winemaker. Whatever the winemaker decides, the value of that data is, they'll embed into every single bottle connected with that NFT, that digital cork. And so what we're doing here is we're actually bringing you into that program a little bit early, and we're giving you the ability to get 2,500 points towards a VIN airdrop, which means that when we launch that currency in September, we are going to be transferring those points into that cryptocurrency for you and dropping it into your account. So pretty cool. And I encourage you.
Awesome. And we have the QR code up there, but we could also send something around, I think, following as well, in case anyone wasn't able to.
In case anyone's on their phone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So one other thing, as we've got about four minutes left. What I thought was really interesting too, we talked a lot about the blockchain innovation, and a lot of talk right now out there about AI, and I was curious how maybe that's playing a role in this whole space.
So I would tell you that, as we tool around the world and we're providing services to wineries on many, many different countries, in the last 6 months, the primary topic on everyone's mind is AI. And how do we use it? I have one of our clients, is currently working on a punch list of 120 different AI use cases that we're kind of helping them parse through it on how to do it. I think it's early days. The smart companies are running pilots and starting to figure out, how they might use it. One of the challenges with AI in the wine space is you need good data. And as Dave has mentioned about, the clipboard analogy, perhaps that may not exist, or it may exist in a very fractionalized manner. And so that makes it more difficult to layer on AI tech on top of it, unless you have an infrastructure component that's bringing that data together so the AI knows, what to rely upon. But I see pilots going on everywhere right now, in everywhere from sales to shit. We even saw some discussion around, could you come up with customized blends? Could AI recommend a customized blend for you? And could we set up a system where you could blend your own wine based on, I like strawberries and I like chocolate and I like, I prefer lemons over oranges, or, whatever the answers are. And then boom, we'll blend something for you. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those use cases hit the market in the next 18 months. And I would guess the vast majority of them are going to suck, and 20% of them are going to hang around and be relevant towards the future.
Wow.
The interesting thing about wine is there's so much information, right? Like there's so many things to know. And I think that's really intimidating to people. I think that's one of the reasons that we're having a hard time attracting the next generation, because wine is really intimidating. When you think about it, if you buy a $50 bottle of wine, you're almost always doing it with the help of some expert, some person, right? Maybe if it's at a restaurant, then you're talking to a sommelier. If you're at a wine shop, there's probably somebody helping you. If you're at a winery, there's someone pouring and talking to you. Like if you're buying an expensive bottle, there's like somebody helping you. The problem is there's two big problems with that. One is you just met that person. They don't know anything about you. They can't really find enough about you to give you a good recommendation. And the second thing is everybody always lies, right? You always pretend like you know more when you're talking to a sommelier or the guy in the wine shop than you actually do, right? So we actually think that there's some really interesting opportunities for AI right now in the fact that they can know everything and you don't lie to it, right? You can actually talk to we're working on a couple of experiments, but like a wine expert that you can talk to and ask questions and tell it what you like and what you don't like, and it will remember all that information. And then, you know, we're experimenting with don't quote me on this because it's not out yet and I can't do a demo, but we've got a kind of a fun project where you go through a series of like questions, conversations with an AI agent, and then a week later, if you're at a restaurant, you can take a picture of the wine list, and based on your conversation with the AI agent, it can look at the wine list, look at the prices, look at everything on that list, and say, "I think you're going to like this one," or "I think you're going to like that one." Like that's pretty cool, and like that's something that we find, you know, it's a step. And what I think it creates is a way for you to have a, you know, one agent or one person or one intelligent agent that not only knows everything there is to know about wine, but also knows everything there is to know about you. Because wine is really personal. Like I've been training it in the experiments that we're doing to always tell me something unique. I always want to know one unique thing about the vineyard. I want to know one unique thing about the winemaker, and I want to know one unique thing about the winemaking process. Now, it's not always very good at it, and sometimes I think it's making it up, it's hallucinating, but sometimes the information's really good, and it really does make me appreciate the wine that I'm drinking a little bit more. And so that's what I like. Like, I really like the storytelling. I like finding wines that are unique. Different people like different things, but if you had an agent that had access to everything that was ever written about wine ever, and could tell you like specific things based on your preferences, I find that to be pretty interesting.
This was so fascinating. We're actually at the top of the hour, but maybe just
and I'm out of wine.
And you're out of wine.
Same. I just finished my glass as well. That was like perfect timing. Oh, there's a drop. Hang on.
But maybe as the final question, or just give some helpful advice. Where can attendees go for next steps? What should, you know, especially winemakers, what should they do next to start capitalizing on this?
So my take on it is, I would identify what you think the top 3 to 4 pain points are currently in the winery. Is it quality of wine? Is it more sales? Is it global expansion? What are the top 3 to 4 pain points? And then for each of those pain points, start thinking through like what might be, you know, potential applications of technology to solve for that. And I think it's going to be different for everybody. The person that's trying to go into China is going to have a very different, you know, solution than the person that's trying to comply with the new EU labeling requirements. For example,
we were saying this earlier, like you walk into a wine shop and every wine on the shelf is the same shape, the same weight, the same size. They look the same. Most of them are the same color. Most of them have the same amount of alcohol. They have the same utility, as we say. So like they're all the same. But like one of those bottles was made by like a guy with a mule, and that's his whole operation. And then the bottle right next to it was made by a $500 million winery conglomerate. And so there's no one solution. There's lots and lots of different solutions. But like Mike said, it really depends on what your pain point is. You know, what we're trying to do at dVIN is sort of build a platform that lots of different solutions can be built on. And it's one of the reasons that, you know, we like to talk to Mike because, you know, he and his team can go out and, build those solutions. So we think that, we fit together well. dVIN, Deloitte, on your way to dWealth. I like it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I saw there was some people not being able to get the QR code, so we could follow up with links after the webinar is over, just to make sure that everyone has access to that. And this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your day, for tuning in, listening in, and for our speakers. What a phenomenal job. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.